You're listening to a Raconteur Studios podcast.
Hello and welcome to the After Hours Skin Clinic with me, Dr. Emma Craythorne, your host and a consultant dermatologist. This is the podcast where all of those skin questions continue to keep coming even when the clinic doors are closed. In this mini episode, I'm going to discuss those claims that you're seeing on your skincare products and what they actually mean, how to spot red flags, how to decode a lot of those misleading marketing claims so you can avoid wasting your money, wasting your time, and really, worst case scenario, damaging your skin. Skincare is this multi-billion-pound industry, and yet so much of what we see in the packaging itself, on marketing billboards and glossy ads and in social media, it's almost kind of designed to manipulate what we're thinking, how we view ourselves, how we view the world, and most importantly, how we're going to spend our money. So I wanted to take this episode to really unravel a few of the marketing myths and arm you with some tools that will hopefully be helpful for you whenever you're trying to cut through the noise that's constantly being presented to us by the skincare industry. And I don't want to come across as if I think all things are bad. I really don't. I think there is so much good about this industry. But I also think it's really important to be armed with the information to help you pick out what is good and stay away from what is potentially bad or harmful or just a waste of money. So let's start with probably the most persuasive tactics that people will use in their marketing, and that is the before and after photographs. I mean, they are the bread and butter of skincare marketing, but actually they can be one of the most misleading tools. I was always known as being the real hater on before and after pictures because I understand how much can go into manipulating that image. I mean, you'll see it everywhere. And some of them are so extreme, it's really pretty obvious that they're a manipulated image, but others can be so subtle. Just a tiny little hint of changing of the background can make one picture more appealing. So let's break that down and let's start with the lighting. So if you imagine the before shot is often taken under harsher lighting, it can often be unflattering. Usually it's going to not have any makeup on it, obviously, but the after shot, it's often taken in much softer lighting, flatter lighting, and even just with the tiny little hint of a smile at the corner of the lips or a smile at the corner of the eyes, that is enough to make that picture look more attractive. In 2017, the Journal of American Academy of Dermatologists actually did a really interesting study on this, and they analysed the before and after pictures that are used in skincare marketing around the world. And they found that controlled lighting and positioning could create the illusion of skincare having an effect, even when no product was used. So they created this study looking at the before picture and the after, making the skin look better. And all they did was adjust how the lighting was set up between the before and after pictures. And then in 2018, so the year after, another group, Russell et al., they set out to investigate this phenomenon that we all suspect but kind of rarely interrogate. And that is this illusion of transformation in skincare advertising. So Russell's group, they pored over countless and countless ads and they examined these very striking before and after images. But the subtle digital fingerprints left behind, there were slight little changes in contrast, slight little strategic softening of lines, and a slight little tweak in the saturation that would make the skin appear miraculously radiant. And this will blow your mind it blew my mind after reading the study, because they showed that more than 80% of these skincare ads had undergone some form of digital manipulation, even when the image wasn't labelled as being retouched. And it's not necessarily an outright fraud because it's not formal retouching, but it's a very clever sleight of hand that can occur so that it will make the human brain who's interacting with that image want to believe in the magic of skincare. So when you see an after photo, you do have to bear in mind what shadows have been created, what subtle tweaks have been made that your brain's not necessarily immediately picking up on, because that number is really quite huge at 80%. And then in the year after that, actually, again, another group called Kang et al., they decided to test a very simple question. And they looked at what would happen to subtle changes in facial expression to see if that gave an illusion that the skin was more radiant. So they tried to keep everything all the same, all the lighting was the same as much as they could do. But all they then changed was a little bit of a subtle smile. And again, no skincare products were used. But again, it gave this illusion that the skin was more attractive and more radiant just by this very subtle change in the facial expression. So that is one thing that we must bear in mind. Whenever we're looking at these before and after pictures, we're not really judging the skin in isolation. We never judge the skin in isolation. We're judging it in all of the surroundings that are there in front of it. And that is really, aside from the actual obvious retouching that happens in many cases and the really crazy before and after pictures that you'll often see popping up on my social media feed where actually a totally different person is used in the after picture. But that is so obvious, it's ridiculous. But it's these subtle things that often play with us. Another thing that can often be used in, for example, clinical trials in these before and after pictures is that even subtly just using a moisturiser on the skin, there was a study shown that in itself, just a very good moisturiser, can reduce the appearance of these wrinkles depth by about 20 to 30%. Now, that's not a real change in the skin whatsoever. It's not a sustained change. There's no cellular differences building up collagen. It's just essentially a little plumpening of the skin that gives this impression of the wrinkles being reduced. And often even just a good moisturising effect of many creams can give that impression. And we see that in quite a lot of clinical trials that are put out by skincare companies that are not necessarily the kind of trials that might be used in a science experiment, for example, that we published in one of our scientific or dermatology journals. So the before and after pictures, they have, a real lot to answer for. And it's one thing to think about, this idea of good lighting, a touch of digital editing, a strategically timed photo, and that can make all the difference, even whenever skincare hasn't been used. So one point of marketing is the before and after pictures. Another part is the storytelling that goes alongside marketing a product. And the other is often about user experiences. But there is another area that is rapidly increasing, and that is the use of award ceremonies to try and convey authority and efficacy to certain products. Now, some of these award ceremonies are particularly well run. They have panels of dermatologists, cosmetic scientists, user experiences, and those products are analysed to the nth degree. But some of the other award ceremonies require the brands or PR companies to pay to include their product, potentially pay to have their product do well in the award ceremony. And so the idea of having received a skincare award might not be as reliable as you might think. And gives a false sense of prestige to a skincare product that might not necessarily be as effective as you need it to be. But that's not to say that all of these awards are meaningless. Far from it. There are some very independent organisations running very rigorous blind testing, but it's always worth to ask, who is funding these? What is the message behind this? Is this a money-making exercise for the awards company? Is this a money-making exercise for the PR company? So they're feeding into each other. It's really worth looking into these awards to understand a little bit more about them before just accepting that as a badge of honour on a product. Another red flag is to do with certain terms that you might see on skincare products. So things like clinically tested or dermatologically approved. And all of those things are designed to be really quite impressive. But actually, a lot of these terms almost mean nothing whenever you dig deeper into it. Clinically tested could mean that product was applied to a handful of people and that's it. They didn't actually measure anything. They just give it to them and they didn't actually do anything with it. So just because it says clinically tested certainly doesn't mean that that product worked. Dermatologist approved might just mean that a single doctor who happened to be a dermatologist happened to be involved somewhere along some form of these studies. Again, it doesn't say that it actually did anything or it doesn't talk about what the outcomes are. A really well-conducted clinical trial is something that's typically using what we would call a double-blind placebo-controlled study. Now, what that means is that you have a group of people, let's say 50, and of those 50 people, you give them a cream. One half of the group gets a cream that's got an active ingredient in it, and the other half of the group are getting a cream that doesn't have an active ingredient, but they don't know whether they have the cream with the active ingredient or not. They're all just asked to follow the same instructions about applying the cream at night time for 3 months. Also, the investigator doesn't know which group has the cream with the active ingredient. So they're following along with the rules of having the investigation they're carrying out. Say, for example, that might be, is there more collagen being produced? So they will then take the skin samples from all of the groups equally and then look at all of the groups at the end to see if there's an outcome. And only at the very, very end of the study is it ever revealed which group had the active ingredient. In that way, we've got this double blind, so nobody knows what's happening or nobody knows what they've got in their product. And it's controlled, so everybody's having things exactly the same outside that environment. So how much sun they're having, what food they're eating, everything can be as controlled as much as possible, trying to come down to the fact that any changes that might have occurred in the collagen has been related to this one particular ingredient. So those investigations are incredibly expensive to run. They take a lot of time, they take a lot of planning. And quite often, the same diligent rules that are applied to that kind of testing is applied to many of these skincare products because, quite simply, they don't have to do it and it's expensive. And it's obviously much cheaper and easier just to say, clinically proved, this is medical skincare. So all of these terms really don't mean anything at all. So whenever you see talk about advertising languages such as reducing the appearance of wrinkles, anti-aging, these words are really just carefully chosen to sound scientific and they don't have any legally binding claims at all. So, reduces the appearance of wrinkles. Well, that doesn't mean it actually reduces the wrinkles. It just reduces the appearance of them, a little bit like a concealer would do anyway. Occasionally I'll see on a skincare product or in an advert for one the term chemical free. And obviously this is nigh on impossible to have something that's chemical free because everything that we have, whether it is a natural ingredient or not, is all a chemical. Even if you had that bottle of your skincare product that was chemical free, it couldn't even have water in it because water is a chemical. So this idea that chemical ingredients are bad has gone so far into the area that people are trying to think that they can make products without chemicals, which is just completely impossible. Science is so nuanced. And ingredients aren't simply good or bad. We see this in endless lists that are produced on social media feeds or on apps declaring an ingredient a good ingredient or a bad ingredient. But actually, it's not just as kind of black and white as that by any means. In reality, nothing at all is inherently toxic, I suppose. It's all about the dose that really is the important thing that matters. So I think then when we're thinking about these chemicals, it's not really about is it a bad or a good chemical? It's really about what is the chemical being put in there for? What is the job of the chemical? Is there good scientific evidence for that? Does that ingredient have any safety concerns with it that's been borne out in true toxicology studies, has been borne out by the ingredient agencies that govern which ingredients that we can put into our products? And actually, also a really important question is who's actually benefiting from making you feel scared of an ingredient? Because a lot of movements, for example, within the clean beauty movement, it's designed to scare you into being worried about certain chemicals. And actually that industry is then benefiting as a consequence. So it's worthwhile questioning that before you think, I can't possibly use that ingredient on my skin. There's actually so many of these terms and I'm going to cover a lot more of them in a separate episode, so make sure you listen out for that. Well, that's a wrap for today at the After Hours Skin Clinic, and thank you for joining me. I hope that you do feel a little bit better equipped with dealing with some of those claims that you see on skincare marketing and really ready to spot those red flags. In the meantime, why not drop us a question using our Instagram at After Our Skin Clinic, or you can email us at ahsc@raconteur.tv. If you enjoy this episode, please tell your friends. We'd love to have them listening to us as well. Leave a comment or a review, or importantly, a question. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, and that way you won't miss any of our episodes. Take care of yourself and your skin, and don't forget the SPF. And I'll see you next time on the After Hours Skin Clinic.